there's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down, and shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Hey, gang, welcome to Monday. And we got a little bit of the Mondays going on here. Glad you're with us. I hope you heard it. The brand new theme song, courtesy of obpmusical.com. They do commissions. Nico Ettore over there did that for us. You'll now hear it before we come in and when we leave about the old man yelling at the clouds. I think it's rather appropriate. Live on Just the Game here, I would be Rob Kerr, and hopefully you know who you are. We are broadcasting live from Treaty 7 territory, and of course this program is inclusive. Everybody is welcome. It's a safe spot. We want you to come in and enjoy sport with us. And actually, there's some stuff to talk about on that end. A little bit more local. The local hockey heroes find themselves on the road. Now, this is the bizarre, crazy part. Kind of squint your eyes and grit your teeth and believe this, if you will. Fall in overtime to Dallas on Saturday night by a 6-5 score. Now, they came back from a 3-1 first period deficit, ended up with 2 leads, held those 2 leads for a combined 3 minutes and 28 seconds and lost in overtime, which isn't that uncommon. They're now 4-12 in OT and 2-3 in shootouts. The 1-goal loss is a franchise best 26-1 goal losses so far this season, with still a handful of games to play. Now, that all seems bleak, sure. But in Los Angeles tonight, against Anaheim tomorrow, there is a scenario in which this club wins both games and finds itself tied with Winnipeg. There is a scenario. There is indeed a scenario. So, hey, that's why you play the games. Congratulations to two local teams. Mount Royal University Cougars Women's Hockey Club ranked 8th in Montreal. They knock off the number 1 seed, and then they knock off the host team. And then last night, the defending champions, they tie it with 1.8 seconds to go, win it in overtime. And the women come home with gold in U Sports, which is amazing. It's a great story. We're going to talk a little bit more about that game as well, a little closer to home. My former institution, the St. Trojans men's basketball team, won the national championships yesterday that they hosted. And now it's 6 times they've won their conference, but this is finally a national championship for them. And that was a big scene as well at the St. Jim. So a fantastic weekend of sport in our city, and congratulations to those teams. So much to talk about, and we will get into it a little later on. Ryan Pike will join us, the managing editor of FlamesNation. Lots to talk about as Calgary gets set for yet another very important week. As well, a couple other things we want to talk about from around the NHL. But our very special guest is here, and I'm looking at you, Mark. Can I go ahead? I can. All right. Right from the get-go, from day one, if I was coming back, this is the guest that I wanted because I have watched with great admiration the work that she has done, that her husband has done, that her family has done for the last 5 years. We'll go 4 will probably be more specific to what we're talking about. But amazing to me is the decision to live their lives in the public eye. And while there are many reasons to do that, what has become very apparent is that this is an opportunity for others to learn. This is an opportunity for them to be able to share their journey, and I think inform a conversation that needs to be had, not only in our community, but in all communities, about the impact that that serious diseases can have, not just on the individual, but the family unit as a whole. And then I think a larger conversation about the community. Very excited that Kelsey Snow can join us. The podcast is Sorry I'm Sad podcast. You can also read her at kelseysnowwrites.com, and Kelsey's in studio finally. You weren't here the first time, right, but you had a good reason for that. How do we find you today?
I'm here.
Yes, you are.
Here. That's usually my answer to people. I'm here.
Yep.
Good today. Today's a good day.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
I want to go back and set the table a little bit, because I think your story, which has, as I mentioned, played out very publicly, I can't help but imagine people have kind of picked it up as it's gone along, kind of maybe made some assumptions about, where they come into it, where they've learned. But I want to go all the way back to the beginning. It's not by accident that you're writing, and not by accident that you're doing a podcast. You are a journalist by trade. Actually, you're a sports journalist by trade, correct?
Yeah, that's how I met Chris. We were both journalists at the Boston Globe. I was an intern.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody told him recently he'd be canceled for this now, but I was an intern and he was a Red Sox beat writer, though we are very close in age. And yeah, so I interned at the Boston Globe for 2 summers, at the Los Angeles Times for 1 summer when I was in university. I went to the University of Kansas. And then after that, we moved to Minnesota. Chris was hired away from the Globe by the Minnesota Wild, which is when he left journalism and started working in management. And I did some freelancing in Minnesota. I grew up about 4-hour drive from the Twin Cities. And so I grew up watching the Twins, listening to the Twins with my dad and my grandpa. So I started doing a little freelancing for them. And then during the St. Paul Pioneer Press and during spring training that year, both of their Twins writers quit. And they knew me and I was there. And that was it. So I covered the Twins for 5 years, which was amazing because it was sort of my goal job.
Sure.
So my dad could wake up in the morning, and I grew up in a tiny town in South Dakota, 900 people, but he could read me in the newspaper and after the game that he watched. And it was pretty special for me.
So was it journalism? Was it sports journalism, or was it baseball coverage? What was the lure for you?
Into writing?
Yeah.
I just liked writing.
Okay.
And then I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a sports writer.
Okay.
And that kind of found me. I interned first actually at the Duluth News Tribune in Duluth, Minnesota. And they kind of asked me if I wanted to do sports. I had been writing I started school at the University of South Dakota,
Mhm.
and which is where the founder of USA Today went to school, which is I don't know if he's still, but he funded a couple of full ride journalism scholarships a year there. So though I did want to leave my tiny little place, I felt very obligated to go there so I started there. Yeah, and I had been doing both news and sports for the college newspaper. And so Duluth asked me, do I want to do sports? And then LA asked me the same thing the next summer, and you don't turn down the LA Times.
No.
So there I went, and I did sports there, and that was, by then it was solidified.
You were entering at kind of an interesting time, right? You would have been prior to maybe the full impact of blogging and the internet. Did you have any sense that you were stepping into a kind of a changing business?
I think by the time I got to Boston, that was sort of on in the topic in the media dining room was, oh, now I have to blog the lineups and what is a blog? And then by the time I got to Minnesota, probably the last couple years, three seasons I was there, maybe.
Yeah.
And I had, then Twitter became a thing. And so, but yeah, it was sort of in the middle of my sports writing career that all took off.
Sports writing or baseball? Which was
I did a little bit of both. I started at the Pioneer Press as the backup Twins writer.
Okay.
So I did some football, I did some college basketball, other things.
Yeah.
And then probably the last couple of years, I was the full-time beat writer.
But there is something about covering baseball compared to other sports. It's more poetic. It's more literary friendly. I'm trying to say to a literary writer. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say.
It's a romantic game, Rob.
Yeah,
it's a romantic.
Let's go with romantic game. Yes, but it's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, baseball is so special because every single game, it can be something that's never happened before because it's such a static game. It just lends itself to different scenarios and maybe more. It's challenging, I think, in the grind of it. There's so many games, but it's not as fast paced, right? And so that lends itself to a more slowdowns and more obvious interactions and things that are happening in the game that you might miss, right? In a game like hockey it's back and forth so much faster.
Right. Were you, I don't know, for the lack of a better term, was it a positive experience to cover the team that you grew up watching? I had that experience and I didn't like it.
Yes, your heroes become not your heroes, right?
Right, yeah.
No, it was a really positive experience. The Twins were a good group of guys for the overwhelming majority. That was when Justin Morneau was there,
Sure.
Joe Mauer, Michael Kadire, Joe Nathan. They were a good team, though they just ran into the buzzsaw of the New York Yankees in the playoffs every year that I covered them. But they were very down-to-earth team. The manager set the tone there. Ron Gardenhire was the manager the entire time I covered the team. And, he was a quality human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that set the tone. Smaller market team. I always sort of compared them to like being like a hockey team in that way. Like they seemed approachable. Not all teams were like that. I covered a couple summers covering the Red Sox. And at that point when they were that was a different thing, the media there was a different thing. More laid back atmosphere in Minnesota as far as that goes.
You mentioned Chris joins the Wild, leaves journalism, joins the front office. Did you share or do you share his analytics love of or understanding thereof?
I like analytics when someone tells me about them, but I hate math.
Okay.
So I'm like I went into journalism because I don't like math.
Okay.
And I like writing. But no, Chris always had that when he was a writer too. He always had that. He was fascinated by how he could figure something out analytically and with numbers. So it was very obvious jump for him to do what he does now.
He leaves the Wild. He comes to Calgary.
Yeah.
What's the plan for you at that time? What were you hoping to do, or what did you want to do when you came with him to Calgary?
Well, our son, who is 11, was 5 weeks old when we moved to Calgary. So I knew that I could not be a mom and a baseball writer in the ways that I wanted to do either of those things. And so, we thought, well, we'll go to Calgary. The saying in sports is you get hired, you get fired. So we didn't know what to expect for how long it would it would last up here. And here we are. It'll be 12 years in September that we've been here. We have our citizenship now, and Canada is stuck with us.
Yeah. So you were fine coming up being a mom. Did you not dream, but at that time as you're coming up here, Cohen's really young. Did you think you could maybe still cover baseball remotely in that? I mean, or is that more of a more recent incarnation of kind of that remote work coverage?
Yeah, I don't think I felt like I would be doing any baseball writing here for sure. And I thought that I thought I would want to try to find some way to write.
Yeah.
And then I just really loved being a mom. And so that made sense for me for a long time. Yeah. Being a mom is a lot of work, I've learned.
Yes. As a father, I can say, yes, being a mom is a lot of work. The podcasting, the broadcasting, had you dabbled in that at all prior to?
No, I did probably like a radio hit here and there when I was covering the Twins. Not much at all, though. I didn't do really much at all. Maybe a couple TV things, but nothing big at all. That really just came about because I had been writing about what was happening with us. And I got so many responses from people saying things like, I mean, the one that really stuck with me was someone said that they printed out a blog post that I wrote and brought it to their therapist and said, this is what I have been feeling, but haven't known how to say.
Right.
And I just felt like I got enough messages like that people were really hungry for more spaces to share these stories. And even if they didn't want to be the one talking about them, because not everybody wants to talk about this stuff publicly. I do think that people want the solidarity and the feeling of community, that they're not alone. And so even if they don't want to tell their story, being able to listen to somebody else and say, oh, yes, that's how I feel. Because grief, we all get to our grief stories in different ways. But once you're grieving, it's a pretty universal language.
Yeah. Because and I'll say it over and over again. I mean, the podcast is spectacular and it's so much better than this. But I had to ask because it felt to me, there's an NPR quality to it, and I hope you take that the right way.
Do.
Okay, yeah, and to me, it's almost spectacular in that way. That when I listen to it, I go, okay, you're kind of looking under the hood, going, okay, who's doing this? But
just me.
Yeah, you write, you produce, you edit, you do the whole 9 yards, right? So if we're going to stay on timeline, 5 years ago, you are the one that has a medical, and I'll never forget that because I believe Chris and I were going to go have breakfast, and he had to beg off, rightfully so. But we don't have to get into the social media part of it, but that was rather traumatic and kind of a life-changing moment for you.
Yes, I had a stroke. Yep, I had a stroke that didn't present sort of in a typical way that a stroke does. It was in my cerebellum. It really impacted my balance. So I always say, like, I didn't have to relearn how to walk. I just couldn't stand up.
Right.
So I needed a walker, a cane until my vertigo sort of balanced itself out well enough that I could walk. Couldn't drive for a month, was in hospital for 6 days. 3-centimeter tear in my right vertebral artery was what ultimately was the culprit. So
what was recovery? What was treatment like for you?
Yeah, it just took time. I mean, brain injuries take a long time to heal. You could do one thing in a day and feel just exhausted. And so I was tired a lot.
Yeah.
Like I said, really dizzy. Didn't trust myself for a long time, like cooking dinner, things like knives. My depth perception remains still something that's not as good as it was. I get sicker faster and like heat and things like that, but it really just took time. And that was it. I didn't have to do a lot of physio, a lot of PT or OT. It was just that stuff sort of came back to me. And one day I realized I was making dinner and I did feel comfortable holding a knife, but it just kind of happened naturally.
Again, you mentioned some of the things really haven't all come all the way back, but your recovery on that?
Oh, I say that I completely recovered.
Okay.
Yeah. The things that are different about me are so negligible now.
Okay.
They're not things that disrupt my daily life at all.
And was there a crossover? Were you still recovering when Chris got his? No,
okay. I wouldn't say so. Again, maybe like heat, like summertime, I'd get hot and I go to a baseball game and I feel nauseous faster than I otherwise would have.
Right.
But no, by the time Chris was diagnosed, no, that was definitely not really on the forefront of my mind anymore.
And again, just for the purposes of kind of establishing the story so people understand,
Mhm.
Chris's family has a history of
Yep.
ALS,
Yeah,
correct?
Chris's ALS is genetic. So
Yeah.
most ALS is sporadic, meaning there's no family history. But Chris's is genetic. 10 to 15% of all ALS is genetic, and when it is genetic, it decimates families. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is devastating. And the same token, because usually you can trace familial ALS to a specific genetic mutation, the science and the medicine in understanding and treating ALS is furthest along in familial ALS. The doctor that we saw at Sunnybrook in Toronto when Chris first started this clinical trial that he's been in since he was diagnosed, I'll never forget him telling me in our first meeting that he used to really dread having to tell people that they had a genetic form of ALS, and now he hopes he can,
Right.
because that's what's going to be figured out first.
When did you and Chris first have a conversation about
ALS.
Yeah.
When we were dating.
Okay.
Yeah, he did tell me. At that point, so Chris has lost two uncles, his dad, and his cousin, who was only 28 when he died. And they went in order of an uncle, cousin, dad.
Okay.
So by the time I met Chris, he had just lost one uncle. I never met him. He died before I met Chris.
Okay.
And then there was quite a few years of a gap between his next uncle being diagnosed, and then his cousin Matt, and then his dad, and then Chris. Yeah.
Okay. One last one on the history, and then I'd like to move on. But
Sure.
And that is can you just explain to us when Chris was diagnosed, you went into a blind study, or how would you describe what happened, or was it a placebo study?
So you had a 1 in 3 chance of a placebo and
Okay.
a 2 in 3 chance of drug for 6 months. The study length itself was 6 months. And then they had something on the end of that called an open label extension, which meant that after 6 months, whether you had been on the placebo or the drug during your 6 months of trial, you would automatically receive the drug.
Okay.
So we don't know still whether Chris was on the placebo or the drug, but our powers of deduction tell us he was on the drug, because he has his specific, like the average life expectancy for somebody with ALS is 2 to 5 years. But Chris's specific genetic mutation is particularly aggressive, and it's usually 6 to 18 months of life expectancy from onset of symptoms. And so, by the time he had gotten on the trial, he'd already had onset of symptoms for a while, for a few months or whatever, a couple months. And so, the doctor sort of said ALS is linear, but he had lost first a lot of the use of his right hand, and then we could see it moving up his forearm. And he said, what I'd expect next is that Chris won't be able to raise his right arm above his head. He'll start to lose his shoulder strength. And we just didn't see that. It was October of that year when Chris was first on the ice with Cohen's hockey team as a coach. And it had taken him a while to get on the ice because he had needed sort of an adaptation to his hockey glove because he couldn't hold his stick with that right hand. So the Flames equipment manager, Depot, he sewed Chris's glove into a fist, and he kind of slid it over his stick and used his left hand to grip and all of that. And I remember they were like the first ones on the ice that day, and I was taking a video, and he shot a puck and it ping off the crossbar, and I knew then his shoulder was still strong.
Yeah.
And I sent it to one of the doctors in Miami, which is where Chris was diagnosed. And she said, I can't imagine that he's not on the drug. Like his shoulder shouldn't be that strong otherwise. But that was a very stressful period from that. It was July till through January where we had that chance of placebo, to wonder if you were going to get a drug that could make all the difference. That's a pretty heart-wrenching thought.
And again, it's not an attempt to just kind of gloss over anything, but I just want to establish, where you get, because last week the Vegas Golden Knights did something. I mean, there's lots of times where Chris is remembered and brought up, but I wonder how many people remember where it started, right?
Yeah.
So establishing that, I want to jump ahead to tell me about the decision to live this publicly. Tell me about the decision to tell your story like this.
Yeah, Chris was diagnosed in June of 2019. We went to Miami. In Miami, they have the first and longest running familial ALS research study. So his dad was actually a part of that study. So when we had a doctor here tell us, I think this is some form of motor neuron disease, we called Miami, and they said, you can come in a week for a research visit and you can see Dr. Benatar as the doctor there. And so we went down there. It was over Father's Day that year. We left our kids. It was the first time we'd ever had to leave our kids. And we were sitting in the cafeteria there at the University of Miami building where we were at. And, Chris just said, you're going to tell this story for us, and we're going to do something, because we hadn't really done anything to raise awareness or funds before that. And so it felt like we had a decent platform. We knew that, we know that sport in general rallies around people in situations like this, and we know the power of the hockey community. And so we knew that would be a chance for us to really, try to make a difference. And I started that at that point. I started writing a letter addressed Dear Hockey Family. And it was in December then finally that we did end up going public. And the way that we did that was the Flames posted that letter that I wrote on the website. So it felt also like, as journalists, we want to control the message. And telling it ourselves gives us the chance to do that.
I'm going to say this, and I know you're going to chuckle. People are going to chuckle, and it's not an attempt to kind of, I'll just say it. When was your Howard Stern moment? Because if you watch and read Private Parts, Howard Stern talked always about going up to the edge. And then if he was really going to he had to go over the edge. Yeah. When was your moment? Because I can't imagine there's much you have not talked about. Yeah. So there's telling your story, but then there's also going up to that edge and going, no, we're going to tell all of it. Did you have a moment like that?
I remember having that conversation and saying to Chris, like, that conversation that day in Miami, and saying, I'm not going to hide the hard parts.
Okay.
Because I don't think that does anyone any justice, or it doesn't do a service to people who are going through hard things to pretend like this is easy for us, and to pretend like this is great, and that terminal illness makes marriage easier or something, makes parenting like, we all want to say like, oh, we have this moment and now we live in this place where we're always present and we can appreciate it's like Hallmark moments all the time. Like that's not reality, right? We got to go back to real life. You do have that little bubble period, I think, when everything feels just like concentrated love. It's like the most pure love you've ever experienced. And then eventually your kids are going to start getting the stomach flu. You got to do laundry. They need snacks for school. You got to run them in different directions to different activities. And the sixth time in the hospital just feels annoying instead of like terrifying, and that's the reality of it. And you have moments where you just, lose it because it's too much. The kids lose it. I lose it. Chris, we all screw up in these situations. We're all just trying to figure it out the best we can. And the best way to make people feel like they're not alone in what they're going through is to not hide the hard parts, I think.
I applaud you on your bravery. I'm not sure that I could write or articulate that I got up this morning and I just didn't want it. I just want to quit.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for all intents and purposes, you've had those and shared those moments. That's ballsy. Like,
it doesn't feel that way to me.
Really?
It feels like, I don't know if I'm just a chronic oversharer, but it feels to me like a release to just say, this is what it actually I'm going through.
Yeah.
It feels, I don't like things that aren't authentic. And certainly if I'm going to share what we're going through, I would feel very hypocritical.
Right.
It would feel very inauthentic for me to not share all of it. Just pretend that it's all like all these great moments. And we've had a ton of great moments, like a ton of like scrapbook for life moments, right? We go through the list with our kids and it's hard to, throwing out a first pitch at Fenway Park or whatever, like these things that are great. But, maybe 20 minutes before that, something happened where there was a moment of like, because that's what happens in our life. And we just have to try to like, okay, that happened. I'm sorry that happened. That was on me or whatever. And now we move on.
I think where it struck me again when I was preparing for this, I think you wrote it, I don't think it was in the podcast, is, he was out before Christmas and everybody, it's going to be a great Christmas. You survived Christmas. That's how you did. Like, again, that's that bravery. And I think it's so important for people who are going to, or in that situation to hear that too, because now you're part of some community that it's okay to say these things.
Absolutely. And I think that, I don't ever want to make somebody feel, I struggle with everyone saying like nobody talks about grief. Nobody knows how to talk about grief. And so in that sense, I think that people who are grievers can do some damage to that conversation by saying like, well, this was the wrong thing to say. That was the wrong thing to say. This person. And so then people feel like, I don't know what to say. And now I'm frozen and I'm going to say the wrong thing. And I don't want to. And so I try to always give people like the benefit of the doubt. I know that they mean well.
Yeah.
And sometimes that I can do that. And some days I'm like, but when someone comes up to me and says something, I know it's because they want me to know that we're on their minds. And then I also feel like being able to say in my blog or in my podcast, like, this is what it was really like. It gives them a chance to understand when you came up to me that day, I didn't have this emotional capacity to answer your question. So that's why I said we're hanging in there, which is my like stock answer when people say, how are you?
Yeah.
But I think also in that need for me to be sort of authentic, I don't have the time to say like, well, actually, all these things are not great, but then I can write it and then you can know, actually, even though you might have seen me laughing today, things are still hard.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think that's a hard thing for grievers is to let those moments of joy seep in and then worry that people think all of a sudden, oh, she's okay. She's good. They're fine.
Yeah.
Because people want to believe that mostly for themselves because they don't want to think that
life's hard
and sadness stays.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a need to understand that sort of duality of emotions that happen at the same time. I can laugh and I'm sad. I'm never not sad. It just comes with the joy. It comes with like they happen at the same time.
So a couple things. One, thank you for writing it because, I'm fortunate enough. I text, with your husband every once in a while. And I always say, anything you need 24/7, here I am. Go, you. And I'm like, well, they never ask. And then I listen to the podcast. I get it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not about like, everybody's great. Like you have resources if you need them. Yeah. That's not what that is about. That's about you as a family. Right. And how you need to process things. Yeah, for sure. I mean, during that time, during Christmas, nobody was going to be able to help me, to help us, to help Chris. Like that was what it was. And as we say to the kids, like, always talk about that book that I read to the kids when they were little, Going on a Bear Hunt, where these kids are going on a bear hunt and they have to face all these different obstacles in nature and they can't go over it and they can't go under it. They have to go through it. Yeah. And so we talk about it all the time. Like you have to go through it. And if you don't go through it, it's just going to come out in other ugly, unhealthier ways. Not that it's always healthy the way that it does come out, but you have to sit in it. You have to honor it and you have to experience it. There's no running away from it. That's reality. And we had to do it ourselves. Do any of your caregivers listen or read what you write? Because it seems to me that we don't have any caregivers. No, I meant healthcare workers. Oh, yeah. Sorry, doctors. Yes. And no, that's what I meant. We don't have any home ones. It was the wrong terminology. But what I meant by that is it just feels like this is important for people in the health. They do a great job. That's not a criticism of them. But it comes from such a place of honesty and just straight truth that I just can't understand why this wouldn't be a benefit to somebody as a nurse or a doctor, somebody to have read or listen to this. Yeah, I think that probably every time we're in hospital, there's at least one or two people who know who we are and say they follow the team and they followed our story. And we've had doctors and nurses, thank us for the advocacy work and the awareness raising that we're trying to do. When Chris was first admitted to the ICU in December, the nurse that he had was like, all right, everybody, this is Chris Snow, but he goes by Snowy. And like, he knew who he was. And he had like a flame scrub cap and everything. And so, those things are huge. Yeah. Anytime you can stand out as a patient, anybody who's been a patient knows that that's good for you. You don't ever want to think that a patient is getting less attention or less, but I am Chris's voice in the hospital and I'm a loud voice in that way. And that helps. You need advocates. Yeah, you do. You need advocates. One of the things that strikes me as I listen to the podcast now is how you picked up the vernacular, how you've picked up the words, how you are. The medicalese. Yeah. And I know that there's a big push. Wow, my 6 years of university beats your 10 minutes on Google. That's not what I'm talking about. You have picked up the medicalese. When did you notice that? Do you see that in yourself? Do you switch into, Kelsey,
Yes.
advocate, I guess, for lack of a better. You do, eh?
Yeah, I think that the more informed you can sound in talking to a doctor or a nurse, the more they're going to talk to you like
Mm-hmm.
an equal,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I want in that situation. I want them to understand how invested in Chris's care I am and how well I understand his disease, because there are going to be times when I think that something different should be done based on what I know of Chris, and I'm going to fight for that to be done. I'm going to do it with, respect and
Mm-hmm.
and calm. I'm never worked up or anything. And honestly, we've had such good experiences with Kerr.
Okay.
We've had great experiences with Kerr here. So I don't want it to seem like I gotta, put on my gloves and go to war for him.
But you would,
for sure,
if you had to.
Yes, I always joke that early in our marriage, we went one year for our anniversary to Napa. And I liken talking to doctors with this experience, which was that I would go into a winery for a wine tasting. And I noticed that if you said like two semi-intelligent things about wine, the people who were like pouring the tastings would be like, oh, if you like this. And they would take you off the tasting menu because all of a sudden they're like, oh, she understands wine in this different way.
Right.
That's the same thing about talking to doctors. It's like, oh, she knows about this new medicine, or she knows about this clinical trial happening, or she understands this about the way that the cough assist machine works, or that whatever, I would say at least 2 times now on a given hospital stay, somebody thinks I am a nurse, which is like the ultimate compliment for me.
Okay.
And
sure.
I would just say that I am an expert in Chris.
Okay.
Like I am an expert in Chris, in his disease and what he needs. And that's my job.
But what worried me, Kelsey, I was going to ask this question and you were going to say, yeah, there's sometimes where they look at me as the pushy wife.
I've never felt that way.
Good.
Yeah. I've never felt that way.
Good.
Yeah. And I don't think I've had to be, I'll never forget when Chris was in the ICU, one of the doctors that he had there, he like pulled me over to the nurse's station, pulled up a chair, opened up the x-rays, showed me what was going on with Chris's lungs, and then like looked at me and said, everybody in this ICU feels a little bit about Chris the way that you feel about Chris. We all want Chris we're all rooting for Chris. We all want Chris to get out of here, to get better, to go home.
Outstanding.
And so when you feel like people are invested in your husband and in your family, that's huge. And honestly, that's another reason to share. It helps to feel like people are pulling for you, whether they're the doctors or whether the people at the Saddle Dome who give my kids fist bumps when they see them because they recognize them, to feel like you have this whole community of people just like hands on your back. It's not a small thing.
Listening to the most recent podcast, you had Chris on as a guest, I guess. Yes. To me, I was fascinated by the communication that you two have. I still hear my friend. I still hear his voice. But you also finished or said what he was trying to say. You articulated it for him. Are you consciously aware of that? Is that just something that you do now? Or is it, just life in the snow house that...
It is the hardest part of his disease is his loss to clearly communicate, is now inability to clearly communicate. He can still communicate, but to clearly and immediately communicate what he wants to say, because you knew Chris before.
Yep.
So you know how quick he is, how clever he is, how, like, I know I'm biased here, but how he's generally the smartest guy in any room I was in.
Yeah.
And I knew, I loved watching him in those situations. And so I know how painful it is for him to not be that person anymore. He not only has to pick his times when there's sort of a space in conversation that he can enter, he also has to figure out which words are going to be most intelligible based on the specific challenges that he has with his speech. And it's just, and then, he might have a good like one-liner that he wants to say, but if I don't, if everyone else doesn't understand it, and then I don't understand it clearly the first time he tells me to tell everybody, then you lose that moment. And that's hard. Those little moments are hard. Right. And so,
but you had that moment, you had those moments in the podcast.
Oh, sure. We do. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one-on-ones are a lot different. A group is much harder because it's a louder situation.
Right.
Like a social setting is definitely a different scenario these days. But yeah, I mean, I will always say that nobody understands Chris more perfectly than Cohen, our son. He's 11, and he's the lead interpreter. If I can't understand something, Chris says, Cohen, can you tell me what Dad's saying? And I ran into one of my friends whose husband works for the Flames the other day at the mall, and she had her husband had given Chris and Cohen a ride. Chris can't drive anymore. A ride to a couple Wranglers games. And she just said how her husband just said how amazed he was at how mature Cohen was as an 11-year-old, and how there were things Jordan wasn't understanding about what Chris was saying. And then Cohen he was saying this, and I was like, yeah, I think I sometimes lose sight of that too, about the different ways that my kids have grown up. But communication is hard. It's the thing that probably makes us the most sad.
You took me to where I was going to go next, which is Cohen and Willa.
Yeah.
And again, you have to listen to the podcast. It took my breath away when you're talking about Cohen and how he's assumed things and is taking things upon himself. And I think the general sentiment is you guys were not happy that he has to at this point, but he's already decided that he's going to play a role, right?
Yeah, he said to me there's a couple of medical things that I do that no one else at this point, we don't have anybody else to do them, and they need to be done in the morning, and they need to be done before bed, and they need to be done, here and there throughout the day. And, we're in the process of getting some home care, but we don't have it yet. And so, there are times when I want to go out with some friends at night, and I need to make sure I'm home at a certain time so I can help Chris with this, or when I'm gone, maybe he needs it. And the other day in the car, Cohen said to me, Mom, I really want to learn how to do suction and cough assist, because then you could go and be with your friends. And I'm like, at 11, I know we always say that it's going to make them better people, but they're more understanding humans already at 11 and 8 years old than most kids are. They have a different understanding of what when someone does something at school, acts out or whatever, they have this sort of different understanding of what must be happening for that person, right? What's underneath this or whatever. But we wish in a heartbeat that they could just not have these things, not learn these lessons, though they're valuable.
How's Willa doing with all of this? And is Willa Dad's daughter or Mom's daughter, or where does she slot in?
Willa has always preferred me long before Chris's diagnosis. I am her favorite person. And I'm honored to be. Willa has gotten a lot better at talking about how she feels. She's so good at telling people, this has been a challenging year for us. We had a lot of hospital stays, ICU, 2 hospital stays in October, an extended stay in December. And her teachers have sent me messages saying that she's gotten up in front of her whole class and said, this is what's happening in my family. And if I'm sad, this is why. Or if I don't feel like playing at recess, this might be why. And, that's amazing to be 8 years old and to be able to learn how to voice your feelings and share that sort of the vulnerable parts of you. She's spunky and she's feisty, and I never want to see that go away. So I like that she still will push back. I don't need her to be, handling anybody's emotions with, kid gloves or whatever. She's a strong-willed little girl, and she has deep, deep love for her people. I find notes all over. I found a note yesterday on my computer that she must have drawn on my iPad. My name is Willa Snow. I'm the daughter of Chris Snow. He's the bravest dad in the world, and I love him with my whole. And I find these things sort of everywhere. So they both do those things, and they're good reminders of what the kids think about all the time. There's a note on our back whiteboard, where our big calendar is, that Cohen left and I haven't erased it. And it says, the snows, it was right at New Year's, that the snows have made it to 2023. The fact that they're aware that that's something that's not a given is a hard thing as a parent.
Sure it is.
Because we want to protect our kids.
Absolutely.
And I think I've said several times now that the hardest part of this is realizing that we can't protect our kids from the hardest parts of life.
What can you protect them from?
I can protect them from being dishonest with them. I can protect them by showing them as best I can how to be communicative about how we're feeling. I can help give them the tools through therapy and other things that they might need. And I can just be there oftentimes our kids aren't looking for us to fix their problems, and we're actually doing them a disservice by trying to. They just want to be seen, just like we all do. They want to be validated. They want us to sit there and say, that sucks. This really sucks. And I love you.
Yeah. You mentioned it before, the support from the hockey community abroad. What does it mean? What's surprised you, if anything, about it?
What has surprised me about it is how complete it has been and how it hasn't wavered. Like we're almost 4 years into this, and sometimes I say to my friends, like, I'm sick of myself. I'm sick of I'm sad. I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
So other people must be sick of it. But we keep having these things where people just show up for us in these amazing new ways all the time. And it's every time I'm shocked by it. And then I know I shouldn't be, because this is what we keep seeing it, you know, and it's been, I think before Chris was diagnosed, Calgary had become home for us, but it's taken on a whole different meaning now.
Yeah.
We feel such a part of this city, and we feel so loved by this city and by this country. Really, it's not, and the hockey community as a whole, but the appearances on Hockey Night in Canada with our kids there. These are the stories that are writing. The moments that are writing our story, and our community and our country are right there in all of them.
Tell me about the Snowy Strong helmet stickers and how that came about. And I know that's kind of dominated social media for you as well.
That's been awesome. Willa played U9, U9 Cactus Warriors. That was their name.
I love it.
Yes. For the Northwest Warriors, that's our community hockey association, and lots of new people on the team. And I always say I'm never looking for new friends at this point in my life, but I always find them at hockey, and oh, you're too good. I got to take you with me. Now you're stuck. But early in the season, Willa's head coach, Brent Booth, came up to me and said, I don't know if you know this, but my wife's sister actually died of ALS, and for a rare disease, these stories come up not
more common than we think. Yeah.
The dad of the manager on Cohen's hockey, one of the dads on Cohen's hockey team, his dad died of ALS. So they're just, these stories are everywhere. But anyway, he came up to me and he told me this, and he had a little emotional talking about it. And then, I talked to his wife's name is Sarah, and I talked to her about it throughout the season here and there. And then, obviously we had a lot of hard things during this hockey season, and we needed a lot of help. And then, I don't know, must have been only a couple of months ago now.
Yeah.
I got Willa dressed for a game, and I walked out of the dressing room, and our team manager, her name's Tova Stewart, she walked up to me and she said, I made these stickers, and I just wondered if it'd be okay with you if we wore them on our helmets. And they have the cornflower, which is sort of the international symbol for ALS, and this beautiful cornflower that she drew. She's an artist. She's a beautiful artist. And then they say Snowy Strong on them. And I was just totally taken aback. I had no idea. And Sarah had brought the idea up to Tova, and then Tova made the stickers. And then I think Tova thought we'd sell some or give some to Cohen's hockey team, a few other Warriors teams who I have friends, things like that.
Yep.
So she thought maybe about 200 stickers. And I think we've sold 6,000 stickers and raised $9,000. And I'm getting posts on Twitter. Massachusetts girls hockey teams are wearing them, just everywhere. And, it's amazing. And I don't know if I'm breaking news here, but I think the Flames are going to wear them this week.
Really?
I think so.
Oh my.
I think so. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But I'm pretty sure that is happening.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that we could go from U9 community hockey all the way to the NHL with these little stickers, and that's totally organic.
But that's really, and I don't want to disconnect it from you two, or you four actually. But in many ways, that's really what Snowy Strong has become. It's become this kind of rallying cry for good in hockey, right? Or good in sport, really. You go back to the videos during COVID. I mean, that had to have been
trick shots. Yeah. That was so fun.
Right?
Yeah.
From everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's about, I hope that what Snowy Strong means to people is resilience and perseverance. And and gratitude and, you know, finding a way to see the beauty in life, even when things are hard. And I think that, you know, sport is such a good example of how to do that. You know, I recently read the Beartown series that Frederick Bachman wrote. I don't know if you've read them, but it's all about hockey town, and it's the good and the bad
Yep.
of hockey. But there's this theme where they say, what are we doing this for? These are just moments. And then this sort of like old wise character in the book says, but what is life if not moments?
Right.
Like, that's what we're doing here, right?
Right.
And so these moments have been, these are the moments that buoy you in the other moments, right?
Have you spent any time or talked to Frida Backlund and the work that they've done?
I certainly have talked to Frida here
Sure.
and there, yeah,
Yeah.
but we haven't had any sort of sit down conversations. But I know they do such important work in the community in so many things, and they're such amazing humans. And when they find, you know, what they've done for the ALS Society of Alberta is incredibly important, and we've benefited from that.
Sure.
We benefited from the equipment loan program
Okay.
through the ALS Society of Alberta. It's an incredibly important program that gets necessary medical equipment into the hands of patients and families, and it's hugely important. And the Backlunds do very important work with them.
I guess it's kind of a silly question based on what we've been talking about in the sense of, do you have to sit down and talk to them? No, you don't. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's just, it's
Yeah.
what is, right?
I mean, when Chris was in the hospital in October, they had a bunch of frozen meals sent over to our house. I mean, that's what, you know, that's what people do in those situations in the hockey community. They show up for you, right? Like the other one was Cohen's hockey team played in the city championships, U13, AA city championships last week. And the next day after we lost, it was such a bummer. But we finished 8th of 12, and then we ended up so we had this great run in the cities, and it was wonderful. And the next day I got this message on Twitter from a guy who said, you know, I don't know who he is. And he just said, I wanted to do something nice for you. And I have friends who are going through the same thing you are. And so I just went to Max Bell and I shot the game, and here's a Dropbox full of all these photos. And they were photos of the whole team and Cohen, and, you know, like, that's amazing. Cause people always say like, well, tell me how to help you. And I'm like, those are the things. Just find your thing that you can offer and help somebody. Right.
Yeah.
And that's like people, I'll get a text from a friend. I left a meal on your porch. You know, they don't know whether I needed a meal that night, but I mean, I don't cook anymore, so I do. But that's how people show up for you.
Are you exhausted?
All the time. Yeah, all the time.
You all right?
Yeah, it's hard, you know.
Oh, no. Yes.
It's hard.
Absolutely it is.
It's hard. We don't have family here. And we have a wonderful community of people, but family is a different thing.
Yep.
And we don't have family here. And we got sort of thrown into the meat grinder after the ICU, because Chris was quite capable and independent still before the ICU. And what happens with ALS is that when you are sick, it sort of just, with other things, dealing with other still maybe illness caused or not, but it just sort of pounces on the parts of you that you're already struggling with, that are already having like parts of your body where the disease has already started to show up. And so Chris lost most of the use of his left arm. And so he has like no use of his right hand. That was where this ALS first presented. He can still raise his right arm above his head, which is what the doctor said.
Right. We talked about this off the top. Yeah. Okay.
Can still do that. So right shoulder, okay. Right hand sucks. Left hand can still is not great, but that's where he does all his work, types, texts, does his work with his left hand, but his left shoulder sucks. And his left bicep and tricep are sort of blown out too. And that's what the ICU costs us. And I mean, that's hard.
Because I don't understand completely. Will any of that come back? No. Okay. So that was lost. It wasn't just because he atrophied or anything like that in hospital. It's a loss.
Yeah, that's a loss. I think for a few weeks we thought, okay, let's see, like getting strength back. But once you've lost muscle, like once your motor neurons in that part of your body are gone, there's no signal left, right? There's a break. If we cut our microphone cords right now, we got to get a new cord, and we unfortunately can't get new motor neurons.
Has there been any advance? Because you're also an advocate, and I know, I've seen you, getting out and trying to raise the rally for, both governments on both sides to move on things and not to drag their heels. Have we seen anything in the past 4 years in terms of advancements, or are there things on the horizon that give you hope in the medical field?
Yeah, I mean, Chris's drug is, so far as I can tell, the most promising thing out there. That's the medicine that he's been on since in the clinical trial that he's been in. But a couple of other ALS, treatments have worked their way through. One was recently approved in Canada and in the US. Um, the FDA is actually this week convening a meeting because the drug that Chris is on is going up for approval. I think that approval meeting is next month, but this month is the meeting where sort of they gather anecdotal evidence, people can testify. So Chris and I are delivering oral testimony to the FDA panel this week in hopes that we will get this drug, which Chris is on, is called tofersen, approved. It is a specific targeted medication in a disease that already there are not a huge number of people living with it at any one time, largely because of how quickly people die from the disease.
Yep.
Only 1% of all ALS is caused by his type of genetic mutation, and this medicine is for his type of genetic mutation.
Very specific.
Very specific. So it also gives a huge amount of hope to the greater ALS community, because if we can find a medicine that does something that impacts this disease in a positive way, then that means it could open the door for other medicines. So it's extremely important. I think in the ALS advocacy community, we are always trying to lobby these governing bodies to say, listen, we should be able to decide how much risk we want to take. We are already told we are dying quickly. If we have the chance to take a medicine that's going to extend our lives, we should be able to take that chance. We aren't looking for home runs. We want a home run.
Yeah.
We hoped when Chris started this medicine, it was a home run.
Right.
For 9 months, we saw no progression of his disease in an aggressive progressing mutation. So we thought maybe this is the thing. And then we saw some progression in his face, and he's had a lot of losses since then. But, his dad and his uncles all died within 9 months of being diagnosed. His 28-year-old cousin, 18 months. And here's Chris at home right now working, goes to work still, has a full-time job, skated with Willa last weekend at her parents versus kids game, and we're almost 4 years into it. So there is, in our minds, no doubt that this medicine is the reason why Chris is alive. And he's not only been given extra time, he's been given extra good quality of life. It's not like end stage life. You're on a
He's not in hospice.
No.
Right.
He's very much alive.
Yeah.
And so what we want these governing bodies to do is help us approve these medicines until we can cure this disease. Let's just let's turn it from terminal to chronic. Let's say, hey, you have this disease, you're going to live with it the rest of your life, but you can take these medicines and you're going to slow it down, or you're going to stop progression, or you might have progression still, but you're still going to be here.
To me, and it's, obviously in our family, but to me, I believe Crohn's disease used to be terminal and is now chronic. So this is not an unprecedented, this happens as science evolves.
For sure, any disease, right? Any disease, the science has to catch up. Any disease that's deadly, and ALS, we're always saying cancer treatments get approved all the time that may help for a few months, may extend life. That's what we're looking for. We want more time. Right. That's what we all want. We all want more time with the people we love. There's never enough time. But my husband was 37 when he was diagnosed and given 6 to 12 months to live. So an extra 6 months. Yep. That's huge.
Can we do anything on that front? Is there any kind of support that somebody listening to this podcast, or somebody that, hears about this? Is there anything that we can do to support that?
Good question. I think that, you can join our calls on social media for the FDA to approve this drug. Generally speaking, I'm speaking about the FDA. Usually the FDA approves a medicine and Health Canada
follows behind. Yep.
Actually, this medicine that was recently approved, Health Canada approved it first.
Okay.
Which actually put a little pressure on the US to do it. So yay, Canada.
Yeah.
I think being aware, and I think paying attention, You know, I often say if one of the reasons why we are public, there are many of them, but one of the reasons is if you don't have a family, you don't have a personal connection to this disease. I'm offering up my family as your personal connection, care about my family, be invested for my family.
Yep.
And you know, join that conversation.
The podcast is Sorry I'm Sad. Where'd the name come from?
Just like a text thread with my friends, and I said maybe I should start a podcast. I'd never even opened. I don't have any. I used GarageBand because that was what was free on my computer, and I'd never even.
And yet you create the NPR. I mean, this is the part I don't understand.
And I just said we were throwing out names, and I was like joking about being a new Canadian, and I should apologize for everything. So, and if I'm really Canadian, I would say I'm sorry.
Yes,
sorry,
exactly.
I'm sad, but
sorry, I'm sad.
Sorry, like in America.
Sorry, I'm sad. And listen, this is an inappropriate question. Why is it? Because you're producing it yourself, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's come to you and said we want this.
No, I do it all myself.
Oh, that's insane to me. And the reason I say that is I listen to it and because you have a Patreon account, and that's how people can support you with the podcast.
Yeah.
But again, I'm listening to it going, oh, this is like I say, it's NPR. Oh, I put it together. There's something wrong about this. KelseySnowWrites.com. You've been doing that longer though, right?
Yeah, not too terribly long, but yeah, I do. I kind of started that website with the idea that I would start freelancing again at some point.
And they're somewhat complimentary, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, the topics are my life. So I write about my life and I talk about my life.
Is it with the podcast that, it has to, because I thought there were a couple that you went out and
well, I've interviewed a lot of other people.
Right.
Too. Yeah.
Right.
No. So, I think what I always say is that when Chris was first diagnosed, I really was like, I'm going to maintain this hope. I'm in this drug and I don't want to hear anybody else's sad stories because I don't want anybody messing with my, good vibes.
Yep.
My maybe toxic positivity here, which I've learned since.
Toxic positivity?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, that's when you are only positive to the detriment. Like you're like, just everything's good vibes only.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see in that context. Yes, absolutely.
So maybe in that sense, I was like, I didn't want anybody else's sad stuff. I thought I'm just going to stay in this place where this drug is going to work and we're going to be the one, we're going to be the miracle. And then the longer that I had to sort of wrestle with what was happening in my life and acceptance and all of that. I just kind of lost my train of thought. I was saying,
well, we were talking about toxic positivity and
I was saying that I really wanted to, like, what I really found at that point was that I went the complete opposite direction. And what I wanted to know is, how did you survive your hard thing? That impossible thing that happened to you that you didn't think you were going to survive, and that everybody else says, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I don't know how you got through that.
Yeah.
Which every griever hates
to
hear. But like, how did you get through that? And we should talk about it, because these things are happening to all of us all the time. We all know death is coming. It's coming for all of us. Illness is coming. We can't avoid it. This is life. Life is hard.
Life is hard. But if I don't talk about it, it won't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. If I don't, which do you worry about? Like when you go home, is there something on your shoulder? Are you worried about a shoe to drop? Are you looking around the corner? Are you anticipating
foreboding joy?
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's not about like, I don't know. It's just that I know that another bad thing is going to happen. I just don't know when. It's like we haven't hit our quota for horrible things in life. There's no quota, right?
Make it easier or harder knowing that? Or not hard knowing that. We all know that, but accepting that, I guess. Is it easier or harder?
I think that's like where I don't think it's easier or harder.
Okay.
I think that's where you can really sort of get to the meat of life.
Right.
Is when you can understand that, because then there's more depth in all your feelings. You see joy in a different way. You see love in a different way, because you understand and you're accepting of the fact that this is all impermanent.
I asked you before if you were exhausted. Where do you get anything? Is there any 10 minutes? Is there any half hours or any weekend or something where you can shut off, do what you need to do to process and recharge? Is there any of that in your life?
I'm not sure.
And I have a follow-up to that, actually.
Okay. Before you want to go?
Well, no, I want you to answer for your husband too. Is there any for Chris either?
Yeah. No, I mean, Chris can't ever shut his disease off, right? There's no break from his disease. And even the things that you think should be a break, like for instance, we were in Canal Flats for end of the year hockey tournament for Willa this weekend. And that should be a fun time to like have some beers with your friends and other hockey parents and sit and cheer for your daughter. But the rink is really cold and cold is really hard for him. So he had to find a place somewhere sort of up and where it was warmer in the rink. And then he can't communicate in the way he wants and he can't have a beer because he can't drink anymore. And so those things that should be
The life's little
Yeah.
breaks and little perks,
the
right?
pleasures.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're gone for him. And that's hard. That's hard. And it's hard for me to learn how to navigate still enjoying them and not having guilt over it. Yeah, there's no break certainly we don't go through a day or a moment where we're not thinking about ALS. For me as a caregiver, I mentioned that we are in the process of looking for caregivers, which is great. When Chris started to go back to work after the ICU, I was going with him. He needs help with anything that you do in the day. So tying your shoe, buttoning your pants, pulling your pants up. He now needs help with all of that. And so I was going and then sitting there and reading or writing, and that was fine. But at one point, Brad said, like, this is Chris's boss. He said, like, this is crazy. We can help him with these things, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
And so, there are those few hours that when the team's home, when he'll go to work, and then I guess that's my sort of chance. Those are my little windows. But getting care in our house will be, I know, ultimately a good thing, but it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to be like, oh, have someone in your house for however many hours. And, nobody really wants that.
Is it pride?
No, it's just another
intrusion.
Yeah, I suppose it's that. And it's just another reminder that you don't get to have that sort of quote unquote normalcy it'll be your new normal for sure.
Yeah.
But you have to adjust to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm Sad podcast. It's available where all good podcasts are found. And I do encourage, there is a Patreon link. Where can people go to support it?
Patreon.com/Kelsey Snow.
That's pretty easy. Yep. I like that. KelseySnowWrites.com as well.
Yeah.
You're on social. People can still purchase the helmet stickers.
Oh yeah. And that's, I think I'm going to get we can double check, but I think it's Tovashan, TOVASHAN.com. I think that's her website.
Not 100% sure. I don't have it open up here. No,
then you can go through her shopping. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But
Yeah.
if you just even Google.
Yeah, no, it's TOVASHAN.com.
Yeah.
And they're right there.
Yeah, exactly.
This is where the host is supposed to have some witty throwaway line about you being the greatest or you coming back and all of those sort of things. I wish you didn't have to do this. I really do. I appreciate though that you've made the commitment to share. And I really do believe that the legacy, whenever that is the ability for people to go back and listen and hear. I can't tell you how many things you put in perspective for me listening to the last podcast about, Cohen and what he's doing and just the way you have the medical ease and all of that stuff. I have so much appreciation for what you're doing. I believe my wife would do it in the same situation. I'd like to think that I would do it in the same situation, but you're living it and you deserve so much credit, which does you nothing right now. I wish you peace. I wish you guys continued success. I think you got a little bit of a break coming up.
Oh yeah.
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 So I hope
knock on wood.
Knock on wood. Thank you again. I wanted this interview right from the get-go because I've just admired what you've done for the last 4 years, and I couldn't do it. I won't lie. The way you have shared is just absolutely amazing, and you're the bravest person I know. So Kelsey, thank you for coming on and joining us today.
Well, thanks for being our friend, Rob.
Oh, it's not hard. It's not hard. Thank you. Well, I mean, we are in the Oodle Noodle studio. I guess I should read an Oodle Noodle read. How about this? Oodle Noodle. They bring the heat, butter chicken, mac and cheese, kung pao noodles, Bangkok pad thai classic, vegetarian gluten options. Pick up and delivery, 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, 105 Main Street North, Airdrie. Really appreciate Kelsey coming in and spending some time with us. Also here, I think I mentioned it, is Cami Kepke. We're going to slide her in a little while too. Kind enough to join us as he always does on a Monday, the managing editor of FlamesNation. Flames are in California to take on the LA Kings tonight and the Anaheim Ducks tomorrow, and then come home in Vegas and San Jose somewhere in there. Here's Ryan Pike. Hello, Ryan.
I'd like to apologize to everyone for the drop in quality you're about to experience from your last guest.
Yeah, listen, I did that to you. I'm the one that has to apologize to you because I've put you in the unenviable position of, okay, follow that.
Oh, I don't think it can. I don't think it can. And
I'm glad, but I'm glad. Listen, having said that, I'm glad you're here because I think in the way, Ryan, you follow this team, you chronicle this team, you also know what the Snow family means to this organization, to its fans.
Well,
and that's not a trite comment.
I started covering the team in like 2011, 2012, basically the first year that Chris joined the organization. So I've known Chris as long as I've covered the team.
Mm-hmm.
So just good people. He he's one of those people that regularly sends you book recommendations when he finds something. Hey, you might like this. It's right up your alley. And good people.
Thank you. That's a great descriptor. You're right, because I know people like that. I know, and I think we need to also credit him in many ways for what our business has kind of gone through, which has been this revolution and evolution through analytics. I think, at first it was easy to dismiss, people who, the Rob Volmans of the world, right? Oh, they're just
Rob Volman, ironically enough, of the LA Kings, the
right of the LA Kings, exactly.
The opponent on Monday night,
right? And Rob Volman, I think you were there. You attended Rob when Rob had the analytics conference in Calgary.
And Chris was there, and Rob spoke, and there's.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, how things have gone because, there's folks on Twitter. I apologize. I can't remember who maintains it, but there's an analytics hiring chart, analytics job chart that someone maintains that basically just tracks the analytics folks who work for all the various hockey clubs. Yeah. And if you had done that chart in 2012, when Chris Snow got hired by the Flames full time, it was, there's maybe, less than 20, maybe 30-ish. And now every team's got multiples. Yep. It's where everything's gone.
Right. And he was, I think, very welcoming, and, he was good for me. Both of those guys, Rob Volman and Chris Snow were both good to me when I was trying to figure it out and understand it and explain it to people, because it was so easy at the time to just dismiss it as nerds in their basement. I hope nobody takes offense, but that's the wording I heard. And it wasn't that. It was never that. Right. And Chris played a role, as did Rob, as you mentioned, with the LA Kings. What a wild game on Saturday that in many ways, I know you did mailbag, and I know you've got a bunch of articles on FlamesNation right now that are in and around that. But assuming things continue on the course of is that not going to be the prototypical 2022-2023 Calgary Flames home game?
It's feeling like that. And I mean, I've said this probably since, I want to say, like before Christmas. The Flames are either going to eke it in on the last 2-3 days of the season, or they're going to, I think right now, Micah McCurdy and the Athletics, Don LaSession and other places have them. I think they're like maybe 2 or 3 points off the pace right now. And so it's going to be one of those things where, there's going to be a game that they steal a couple points, or one of the 15 overtime losses they've had that you'll look back on and go, oh man, you hate to be the hindsight police, but one or two of those swing the other way, and it's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
Game of inches, Rob. Game
It
of
is
inches.
the 26th 1-goal loss of the year, which sets a new franchise record.
With 12 games to go.
With 12 games
there's
to go.
There's gonna be more 1-goal games.
There's going to be more 1-goal games. Tonight's likely going to be a 1-goal game. Their overtime record is 4-12. Their shootout record is 2-3. Maybe what's more shocking to me is that they've gone to overtime 21 times this year. And I would say more than half of those games they led and were tied. You know, Jim Playfair once gave me the line that, you know, if you are behind in the third period and get it to a shootout in overtime and lose, you earned a point. If you were ahead in the third period and it goes to overtime or a shootout and you lose and you just get 1 point, you lost a point, which makes a lot of sense to me. I think they've lost a lot of points this year that way.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I mean, they're kind of a bewildering team because, I did a lengthy piece on Sunday, I think like 1,500 words on the site, looking at why aren't they in the playoffs right now? And they're a team that has, for lack of a better term, a crap load of shots. Like they defend well, they prevent shots, they get a ton of shots on net. There's a handful of people who are always my Twitter mentions who very astutely point out, when I bring up expected goals, because for those of you who aren't analytically inclined, it used to be Corsi was seen as the main determinant, but as the models have become more and more sophisticated with shot metrics, they've looked more at expected goals. So expected goals is basically trying to blend shot volume and shot quality. Right. And if you're ahead of me, you can probably tell where the problem is for the Flames with expected goals, where they have so many damn shots that, in a sense, their expected goals for isn't really a great indicator of their play, because they have so many low quality shots on net. So even if you say forget expected goals, let's just look at high danger chances alone. If you're being in the most narrow reading of quality chances, they're well ahead of their opposition. They're a very good defensive team and an average offensive team. And unfortunately, they're an average offensive team that cannot bury things. They've buried things below a league average level all season.
Right.
And they're a very stingy defensive team who happens to have some of the worst goaltending, like, again, below the league average all season goaltending. Yeah. And that's a tough combination, because if we always joke, if your shooters get hot for a week, or if your goaltender gets hot for a week, that's the difference. And that could be the difference for the Flames. They have yet to, even though Markstrom's played very well recently, he hasn't really been able, if you look at the rolling averages, the Flames haven't had a stretch of 10 games yet where their goaltending is above average.
No.
And they also haven't had a 10-game stretch this year, outside of a couple spurts where their shooting's above average. So despite all of this, if you're someone clinging to your last vestiges of hope as a fan, going, well, can they break it in? Well, this is a team that's fundamentally sound, plays very well, but just like they found ways to lose through weird execution at poor times and just bad luck in every way you can have a team have bad luck. If you say we've seen that, we've seen this movie before, we've seen this movie 70 times this year, and it's always some variation of that. And despite all of that, they're 4 points out of a playoff spot.
So riddle me this one. What would you change about their approach to overtime? And I'm sure, I'm sure there's something, and I'm sure there's smarter people out there than me that go, well, they're not doing this or they're not doing that. But I watched them in overtime. It's not like they're putting Trevor Lewis, Lucic, and Mike Stone over the boards or something like that. 3-on-3 is a bit of a crapshoot. I grant you. I think there's very rarely do they ever lose an overtime game without creating a chance or having a shot for. I just don't know, because it's so easy to go, well, they got to get better in overtime, and they do, but how?
Yeah. And again, some of the weird stuff that's happened has been bad luck. I mean, how many teams have as many overtime penalties as the Flames do? And I think a good chunk of those ones are weird penalties. I'm pretty sure they have a couple high sticking penalties. Yep. They may or may not have a puck over glass. I'm pretty sure almost all of them are like weird stick fouls. So I mean, that's just, it's attention to detail is what it is on those ones. But if I were them, a lot of the things they're doing make sense. I mean, do you want to start off with Anderson, on the ice? Probably. Do you want to start out with Backlund or Lindholm to win the faceoff? Yeah, probably. Do you want to start off with one of your speedy wingers on the side? Yeah, that's usually what they do. I mean, like you said, it's not like they're starting the fourth liners or third pairing guys out. They're starting a lot of the guys that are the power play. They're starting a lot of the guys who are the more responsible two-way guys, the guys you'd expect to be able to have some success in overtime. It's just it hasn't manifested at all.
If I was going to do a typical sports radio hot take, this would be my hot take. Well, this is where they could have used Matt Phillips. So they should have given Matt Phillips a legitimate opportunity. Matt Phillips could have been their guy. He could have made the difference in overtime. That's a hot take. I don't know if I believe that. Like I'm frustrated that Matt Phillips never got a fair shake. And I think his skill set would lend him to, play in this situation. But I'm assuming some guy who's, really played mostly in the American Hockey League would come out and dominate, superstars in overtime. I don't think that's fair to him.
No, I mean, good NHL players very rarely dominate in overtime.
Right.
I mean, it's weird because, they don't play 3-on-3 in the playoffs, which it makes it such an aberration because there's so much importance on this really obscure style of hockey. And then once you get to when the games really count, they don't do it anymore. So it's the most strange thing. Same with the shootout. I mean, those are just two things where, it kind of perplexes me that we have these parts that are so important to make the playoffs, and then we just throw them away when they reach the postseason.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, fair enough.
But fair enough. I don't know. I think the big challenge is the 3-on-3 is a microcosm of how they've been at 5-on-5, where, Daryl Sutter, you could say what you will, criticize Daryl Sutter what you want. He's not wrong when he say they don't have game breakers, because the most consistent Flames players this year have been, in my mind, Rasmus Anderson, who is a very good defenseman, but not quite a game breaker yet, but he's trending very well. And 34-year-old Michael Backlund and 30-something-year-old Tyler Toffoli. I think he's either 30 or 31. He just had a birthday. So Tyler, I'm sorry, I forgot your age. But yeah, I mean, the most consistent players are your 60-ish point first-line winger. Their first-line center has been decent this year, but not nearly what he was last year. Their best two-way player, the guy who's probably going to get Selke votes this year, is their third-line center, their other most consistent player. And, the rest of the lineup has been a series of tinkers. It's, if someone seems like they're starting to cook offensively, you throw them with Lindholm and Toffoli to generate some offense. If someone seems like they need a little bit of two-way help, you throw them with Backlund and Coleman. And then everyone else, you just sort of figure out who's left.
I thought, you and I haven't talked since Thursday. There's been shows since Thursday, but their win in Vegas was, I watched it. I thought their third period was impressive. But as that game started with no Peltier, with no Walker Duehr, I'm like, all right, here we go. Here's the culmination of old and new and all of those sort of things. And, they finally beat Vegas in Vegas. They played a good third period. Having said that, Walker Duehr came back into the lineup. I believe he's out and Peltier's back in. Just a thought. And again, you mentioned Rasmus Anderson. Rasmus Anderson had some real big boy comments on Jacob Peltier and a rookie being in and out of the lineup, and good on him for saying it.
I mean, we mentioned this, Peltier has mentioned this in various interviews. He was up for 2 weeks before he played a first game. I remember Rasmus Anderson's first pro season, they brought him up for a month and he played once, like at the end of the month, because the idea is that, I think Brad Treliving very early on figured, okay, this guy could be a really important player for us. But, now, like, they very publicly criticized his fitness. He was not in great shape during his draft year. They thought they could fix it. They had a talk with him. By the time he went pro, he still wasn't in great shape his first dev camp. He got better. He's in great shape now, and he's done the work, and it's very much paying off for him. But he was someone that they felt they could publicly call out and push because that's what he would respond to, and he responded to it well. And then they reward him with a month up. But the thought process was great. They walked him through this, what they wanted him to do when they called him up and said, you might not play. You might just hang out with, sit by Mark Giordano and pay attention and learn stuff. But I mean, that was a team, I believe, with Mark Giordano and Matt Stajan and a bunch of other really, mature players who've gone through that kind of transition. And I think, I had a long chat with, back when Matt was still playing, I did a feature on sort of his importance in terms of transitioning all these young guys who'd grown up, watching him play. And then Matt was like, thanks for making me feel old. But at the same time, I mean, you having those kind of guys like Anderson is now in that room, like Anderson's, he's not old, but he's in his first big contract. He's a guy playing first pairing minutes. He's, he doesn't wear a letter, but he's basically everything but that now. He's, we talk about, they put Backlund over the ice in the first over the boards in every game situation. That's what Rasmus Anderson is now. He's a guy they really rely on. And, it's kind of nice to sort of see him provide that kind of perspective, because I'm sure, if when he has seen the other foot, he might not have seen it the same way, but just having guys who've been through it and can help young guys along. And I think that'll, that kind of tutelage will help guys like Pelche, like Duehr. Duehr's still very new in his NHL career. And it's, that you don't make trades to open up spots if you don't like a guy. Matt Coronado could be under contract by as soon as Saturday. That's a guy who'd be going straight to the NHL. So you need to have guys in that room that you trust to be able to talk about things like that and help put things in perspective. And, remember this, like, Johnny Gaudreau is healthy scratch his first 2 weeks of his NHL career.
He was on his way to Abbotsford.
Yeah, he was. They acknowledged, like, he's a great player, but maybe he needs to go down there and get some ideas on how to translate, because the college game is different than the NHL. And Coronado will probably learn that soon enough. I don't think they're going to throw him straight in. I think he'll need to watch and listen and learn, and then they'll give him a chance. But I think if you look at how well it's worked this year for Pelche and how positively Daryl Sutter speaks about him most recently, I think that's, that might be the blueprint for what we can expect. So I don't know. It's I'm very curious. This next week is going to be very interesting for this hockey club. 4 divisional games, 4 very important games. If things go well for the Flames by, the end of the games on Tuesday, the Flames could be tied for the playoff spot. If things don't go well, they could be in the opposite direction. You don't know which way it's going to go.
I was going to say, which is the way we've started probably all of our weeks here in the last month, right? It's really kind of, I keep thinking, well, next week, they'll be out and it's when you start playing, but they're still hanging around and they're getting help from Nashville and Winnipeg, who are, Nashville sold off. Winnipeg's not playing really well right now, but at some point, and I thought Thursday was a great example of it. At some point, you got to do yourself a favor. They did themselves a favor. They had another opportunity. They had 2 leads. This is the part that, and it was a crazy game. I sometimes you play that, but 2 leads against Dallas for a combined 3 minutes and 28 seconds.
Yep. They scored 5 goals and they lost.
Yeah.
A team that doesn't
after being down 3-1.
Yeah, a team that doesn't score a lot. That I think Daryl put it in perspective after the game. The idea, like, you're down 2-0. Oh, they could have packed it in. They did. We've seen them pack it in after 2-0. We've seen them pack it in after 3-1. We've seen them pack it in after, they get a lead. Oh no, they tied it. Oh no. They've seen, like, Dallas came back twice, but you got to give, I'll give the Flames credit. There is multiple opportunities, where, they've, for lack of a better term, we've seen the type of body language in the team in the past when things aren't going well, that they go all Eeyore and they go, oh, here we go. And then, things start piling up on them. And at no point in that game did it look like they were going to pack it in. And I think that might be the most encouraging thing for fans, just seeing, like, their battle level was there. Like, did they execute great? No, they did not execute great. That's why they gave up 5 goals. There's plenty of things to improve from that kind of effort. Their power play was tremendously ordinary in that game. It has been ordinary for the back half of the season, maybe the whole season. That might be their big Achilles heel as a hockey club. But they in a game that was entirely 5-on-5 goals until overtime, they went toe-to-toe with a team that's one of the better teams in the Western Conference, a team that, if the Flames eke into the playoffs, that's probably the team they play in the first round.
Yeah.
And that's, if you go into a playoff series with that kind of body of work against the team you might be playing against, you probably feel fairly confident.
Two more for you, Ryan. One, and it's a guy you talked about last week and kind of shocked me when you talked about his defensive metrics and how good he was, but offensively starting to come alive a little bit. Mackenzie Weegar, a very strong week for him. I don't know if I've articulated it. My belief is that the three guys that came over in the summer, Kadri, Huberdeau, and Weegar, were going to be better next year than they are this year. It's just how I felt. But I am getting the sense that Mackenzie Weegar might start living up to that hype of him being the difference maker in that trade. He's been really good here the last month or so.
Yeah. And, I think he looks like a guy who's really confident. I mean, even if you look at the play he made at the point on his goal, it was, they won a faceoff. He went to take a shot and it just, I believe it was Joe Pavelski just sort of got in the lane and he was just like, nope, you're not getting a shot through me. And instead of, you could always pass it off, you could hesitate. He just got the puck back, went, okay, I'm going for it. And he outraced Joe Pavelski, who is not a slow guy. He's not a fast guy, but he's not a slow guy. He's Joe Pavelski. He outraced Joe Pavelski to the net front area and got a shot off. And that's a confident play. That's a confident play for a guy who's his defensive game has been very good this year. He's had his hiccups. Everyone has. Having hiccups with the puck is what happens when you have the puck as much as he does. But he's been so good at sort of calming games down and dictating. And he's made, I think, a lot of really smart plays with the puck in terms of, Rasmus Anderson made a really nice pass to Nick Ritchie, in Vegas to set up a breakaway goal. I thought that I think it was Vegas. It might have been Dallas actually. But actually, it was the Dallas game. But there's been so many of those types of passes made by Weegar this year, and I think now he's sort of become more and more confident to sort of get into the play and become more invested and become more involved, and a little bit less hesitant in terms of his engagement. Like if you're a defensive defenseman, if you're not confident with the puck, you're a little bit more risk averse. You'd make the safe play, and he's shown a confidence level and sort of being like, you know what, I think I can pull this off. Like trying to outrace Joe friggin' Pavelski to the front of the net to get a shot off in a game that your team's trailing. That's confidence. That means that's a guy who really wants to be a difference maker. Right. And I think since the All-Star break, if not slightly before then, he's been one of their better players. If not, you can make a case that he's been their most consistently good player.
Last one for you this week. And I maybe next week we're going to move you to the starting slot so you don't, get buried. I feel bad about that. Understand we have an arena meeting this Friday?
Why, yes. They're for the second time in 3 weeks. We had a meeting on the 10th. There's a meeting on the 24th. So here's some context for you.
Okay.
So City Council has next week off for spring break. And then they have a 4-day week after that, leading up to Good Friday. And then that week, the week of Easter, they have that week off too. So after this week, they work 4 days and 3 weeks. So part of it might be they have something urgent to talk about. Part of it might be, well, it's either get a meeting in now or get a meeting in a month. Right. Could be a little bit of both. Okay. It's definitely a positive sign because we were led to believe things are moving behind the scenes. And if you're trying to read the tea leaves and go, so are things actually going well? They have enough stuff to discuss that they have meetings 2 weeks apart, and you're not going to talk about the exact same things 2 weeks apart.
Okay.
So
the optimism meter is a little higher.
I mean, at this point, more meetings is better than fewer meetings, because if there's no meetings, then there's nothing to discuss.
Just out of curiosity, do you get a spring break? Do you get Easter? Princey's shaking his head. I didn't know we got that time off. That's amazing.
I mean, City Council does, but there's, until actually, come to think of it, I don't think we get any breaks at all, because after
I don't think we get any breaks at all.
Whenever the season does end, whether it's April 13th or 2 weeks after that, or 2 weeks after that, or 2 weeks after that, then it's into draft mode. Then I got to start talking to scouts and getting videos cut, and then trying to figure out how they're going to draft. And then I got to pitch some other stuff to other people. So, I mean, you know this, Rob. It never ends. It never ends.
Never ends. What can we find at FlamesNation.ca this week?
We got 4 games, and the cool thing is, so we got a bunch of playoff important games for the big club. The American League club has qualified for the playoffs, but they're in a very pitched battle with the Coachella Valley Firebirds, the Seattle Kraken farm team, for first place in that division. And, that'll probably go down to the wire. So we have a bunch of AHL coverage, a bunch of NHL coverage. Friday is potentially Matt Coronado's last college game. If not Friday, maybe Saturday. If not Saturday,
Harvard plays Ohio.
Yeah, they play Ohio State. So
Ohio State.
That game's at noon on TSN Plus, wherever the hell they're calling TSN's streaming service now.
Streaming service, yeah. I got
so
you.
I apparently am subscribed to it, though I don't remember doing it, because that's how life works, apparently.
Yes.
But yeah, potentially, Coronado Watch will probably get into high gear, because as soon as Matt Coronado loses a game, the Flames will probably send, I don't know if it'll be Craig Conroy, although it usually is Craig in a contract and a plane and a gift basket and
muffins,
a bunch of Oodle Noodle or something.
Exactly, Oodle Noodle. That's what'll do it.
The Flames are very enthusiastic about this player. He scored his 20th goal of his collegiate season in the conference final loss they had on Saturday. He's really good. He's is he going to be Johnny Gaudreau good? Not right away. He's not but he's one of those guys that if you're to put him in perspective, right away he might be a Jacob Pelche level contributor in terms of, you might not score goals every game, but you'll be able to notice him.
You're a good man, Ryan. I appreciate you coming on today. We will catch up with you, if not before next Monday for sure, in our regular hit. Appreciate this, sir.
Well, have a good week.
There you go. Ryan Pike. He is the managing editor of FlamesNation.ca. Speaking of Oodle Noodle, we are live in the Oodle Noodle studio. We're not just crazy about noodles. We put the same energy back into the community. 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest, pickup and delivery, 105 Main Street North in Airdrie. So 1244 17th Avenue, 105 Main Street in Airdrie, pickup and delivery. I mentioned her off, and this is just fortunate for us, but Cami Kepke was kind enough to come in today. And we were talking about a bunch of stuff. You're leaving here pretty quick, so I'm going to bolt you in and get some thoughts on you kind of in rapid fashion. Kelsey Snow, thoughts?
It is hard to put a lot of these things into words, living with the grief and knowing that sometimes chaos is just the neutral and it makes you appreciate the good moments that much more. A lot of what they do reminds me of a friend of mine, Becca Schofield, who passed away from brain cancer at 18 a couple years ago. But her whole thing was, it was terminal. She knew it was coming, but it was all about living your dash.
Mm-hmm.
You might not know where the end was, but it was all about making the most of the in-between. And it's just such a wonderful perspective to hear and to know that they have just been so focused on educating more people and sharing stories on how to deal with that grief as it comes. And it's just been an inspiration to watch them. And also, oh my gosh, did Kelsey and Chris ever hit copy paste with their kids?
It's amazing. She is amazing. She represents a lot of family members who are taking the lead for their better half's care or their parents' care or whatever, that living their life, their kids' lives. And yet, I can't overestimate or emphasize the medical ease and learning that and becoming that advocate and becoming that person that the doctor and the nurses can talk about and that, has a role and stuff like that. The podcast is amazing, but the conversation, I really, really appreciated that. Let's deal with a couple of really important things. First of all, Mount Royal University Cougars, the girls. There's a story one day when I have some time, I'll explain a little bit more. But 8th seed, they lost to UBC in the Canada West finals. They go out there, they get the top team in the country, they knock them off, then they knock off the host team, and then they knock off the defending champions. But it's how they did that. Brianne Trotter with a pair of goals and the player of the game. They've got outstanding goaltending, but Scott Rivet's team, and it was an incredible story.
I think you take it back further than that. Yeah. I think you look at really Mount Royal has only been around since 2012 in U Sports, and they looked primed for this years ago.
Yeah.
Like they started to see real success in 2019, 2020. They go to nationals for the first time. Yeah. The Panorama happens. The Pantene Pro V happens. The Panda Express happens. I'm just tired of saying pandemic, right?
I know, I understand.
But that happens.
But,
and you know what?
But do you know who was with me coaching in Ottawa this weekend?
Do I ever?
Yeah.
But
the
yeah,
captain from that team, Dario O'Neill.
And so those players get that opportunity taken away from them, basically. And, a couple years later, this group is able to climb that mountain again. And you said come in as the 8th seed, and the finish on this game. So, I mean, first off, you have Tori Williams drawing first blood, played 4 years at North Dakota before coming up here to play for the Cougars. But Brianne Trotter, who missed quite a few games to injury this year, comes back and makes such a big impact for a team that was already doing really well, even when she wasn't there. And to score, like, the Quebec crowd was on its feet. It's the Concordia home crowd. They think they have a second straight title. Not so fast. 1.8 seconds left. Her second goal of the game to tie it. When I tell you, I shrieked watching the live stream. And then, of course, Emma Bergeson from Norway, an all-star, a national all-star, who was able to cap it off. And it's just so wonderful to see the Cougars get that recognition. And your first time really first time medaling at nationals is gold.
Yeah.
What more could you ask for?
And they could have, I think, it reminds me a little bit of the 94 Expos argument. The one that never happened, they probably could have there too, right? During the one that got wiped out by the pandemic. They were probably headed towards that, but who knows, right?
Totally. And you see so many players chip in. Like, you have your Tatum Amies, the Canada West Player of the Year, the captain, but then you have young guns like your Leah Jomas, Athena Hawk contributing, and Caitlin Ross of Red Cliff, Alberta, just a monster between the pipes. She was just rock solid all season. You might have seen her get the shutout at the Crowchild Classic at the Saddle Dome, but no, she delivered. She had a sprawling stop on a breakaway in the first period that just held a minute.
My connection to this team is that on Sunday mornings, the bulk of them come out to skate with our superheroes kids and have for 4 years. And it doesn't matter if they play the night before or whatever. They come out and they're great role models. And they're great people. They're great. And you want good things to happen to good people. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention when you were on with me a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the recruiting class of UFC and what Carla McLeod has done there. It bodes well for a real, and also I want to point out, one of the first people to go out and congratulate was Carla McLeod.
Totally.
Right? Carla McLeod was one of the first, the next time that an NHL coach takes to social media to congratulate the Stanley Cup champions will be the first time. So I thought that was kind of cool. But we're going to have a real hotbed of university women's hockey in our city for the next couple of years, which is really exciting.
It's all about the recruiting classes. It's funny how you can just see how it totally turns the tide for some programs. And we're seeing the groundwork laid down with the Dinos, with National Rookie of the Year, Sid Mercier and the crew. And Mount Royal, it's just good to see them enjoy the fruits of that labor. Also, their women's volleyball team got 5th.
Yes, we should point that out. Now, yes, they did. And they, too, had a great weekend. But so did my former school, the St. Trojans men's basketball team.
Same.
Yes, absolutely. 6 times have won the conference, but hosted the Nationals, won the Nationals. There's all sorts of great storylines here, but kudos and credit to the Trojans program.
This is another case where I think you have to just rewind it a little bit. When I was actually at State, head coach Marty Berkey first came on to join the Trojans men's basketball team. And again, turns the program around a bit. But you mentioned this team winning 6 titles, kind of foundering at Nationals. This time, they finally get it done in dominant fashion. And not only do they get it done for Marty Berkey, they get it done for Charlie Connor, who's just been an all-star in his final collegiate game. But how did Charlie Connor get here? He was a bartender at Washington State, and his friend John Smith said, "Hey, you should come see what we're doing up here. Talk to Marty, come try it out." And clearly it was a great fit, but John was shot and killed in Calgary last season. And it's been tremendously difficult for that team to deal with. They've established a bursary in his name. They've held memorial games. And it was touching to hear the guys say, this probably doesn't happen. This national title doesn't happen. This ultimate high, the greatest way you could end what you could call a college basketball dynasty. Because of this guy's contribution.
It was a great weekend for Calgary sports all the way around, I think. I'd be remiss because I was asking Ryan and you're texting me, and I can't do 2 things at once. I said, and this will be the last one because you got to get to work.
No, I'm supposed to pick up my friend from the airport, but
flight delayed?
I mean, once you factor in how long it takes to get off the plane, does she have to get a bag?
All right.
She'd still love me anyway, I think.
I
if was a
think
little
so.
late.
Okay. But the point I was, the Flames are struggling 1-goal games that we've established. They're 4-12 in 3-on-3 overtime this year. I said my sports talk hot take, which is not necessarily informed, but is good for yelling and screaming and slamming your feet or hands on a desk, would be that's why I wanted Matty Phillips here, because I think Matty Phillips could help you in a scenario like that. Now, reality is, you're asking a guy who would be a rookie NHL player to come out and do that. And I've always felt like, oh, like they have room to carry a shootout specialist, or they have room to carry an overtime specialist. That never really comes to fruition. You've seen Matty Phillips play. Do you think that Matty Phillips could have had a positive impact, or are we asking for too much on 4-12 in 3-on-3 overtime?
Like you said, it's tough to carry a kind of specialist like that, but we all know what I guess the NHL's knock on Matty Phillips is. It's his size. But if there's one aspect of the game where the size really isn't hurting you that much and your speed is really helping you, it's 3-on-3 overtime where guys are less likely to pinch and check you really hard, where you have a little more space to do the things that he really excels in. Also things that Jacob Pelchier is pretty good at.
Right.
Nice to see him get back in the lineup. But I do think if there's one spot where he could have thrived, that would have been it. And for all the there's time yet. The Flames could set the OT loss record this year. The record is 18.
They could.
We're at 16 now. 16 now? Yeah. So this would tie Calgary's highest ever in franchise history. Of course, going back to when the tie was eliminated.
Right.
But Florida outpaced them that year with 18, which is the record for OT losses in a season. That's
And yet,
happened three or four times, I think.
And yet, if you squint your eyes and grit your teeth and they win both games in the next couple of days, they could be tied for a playoff spot by the time the game in Anaheim is over tomorrow.
It was worst case Ontario on Saturday with Winnipeg and Nashville going to overtime.
Yeah.
But then, you get that blessing with the pair of shutout losses on Sunday, and all of a sudden there's that glimmer of hope again. But it feels like sometimes it can just be death by 1,000 cuts.
It does feel like death by 1,000 cuts. It feels a lot like Brent Sutter's first year in Calgary, where they were close at the trade deadline. They were in 9th, but it just slips and slips, and you can never get that grip that you need. You never get that, roll going. This team has not put a roll together all year.
And that's what Saturday was. It was a microcosm of the whole season. It's like
100%.
Sissing 2 early goals, Sissing 4 posts, Sissing out of town scoreboard does not help you. And then just the final overtime loss.
Is that a reference to Zorro? Were you doing the zing for Zorro? And did you actually do an air Z? We're Canada. Yeah. No. I think you did. I think you did. Well, like you say, tonight, tomorrow, man, if they make it close again, to me, it's about being in it and making people care. People will care if they're back in it again.
Yes.
Right? People will care.
I'm so intrigued to see what happens with LA here.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I do think they're going to get up, I think, a little more for the rematch against the Ducks. Of course, granted, last time I thought...
I don't know anymore.
Of course, last time I thought they were going to roll the Ducks and then the Senators would be the problem and you had to put that thing down, flip it, and reverse it. But
yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, just don't have expectations. Is the easiest thing to do.
So in the final mile, I was going to recognize you and Danny did a great job on Friday. Yeah, don't give me that.
My laptop died. I had no notes, and I was like,
no notes.
I was trying.
I think anybody that's watched this show knows that notes aren't really a prerequisite. Hell, half the time I start the show with an apology because I messed something up. The show is fantastic. I had a bunch of people reach out and go, "You should be co-hosting or hosting it," and Danny was spectacular. The whole thing was spectacular. Kevin was spectacular.
Thoughts on his jacket?
Oh, his jacket was awesome. His jacket, yeah. No. That's the kind. This sweater out of the old man dad collection or Danny Austin's jacket? I think the correct answer is Danny Austin's jacket. Absolutely. I'm still trying to get used to being on TV. Or whatever I guess this is streaming. Well, you could put it on a TV, I guess. But you guys were awesome, so I really appreciate you guys covering me on Friday. So that was great.
And Bone, I'll come back anytime.
I know you've proven that. Bone Crusher was good.
Oh my gosh, the best.
Yeah. That's
No,
what I
all
heard.
those CFL guys are just a blast to talk to.
I know.
You almost don't even need to ask them questions. You just got to be like, go.
Yeah. Fill the void now, please.
And it can be the opposite with hockey players. Like I remember when I started, my trick was for non-live interviews, especially junior players, just because they're already like a little less used to the camera, a little more shy.
Right.
Sometimes like you have to say something that's like a little bit incorrect. So they'll correct you and keep talking.
Yes.
You do not have to do that with CFLers.
No.
And it is glorious. You can ask them the most ridiculous things and they will share their opinion.
They have no problem sharing their opinion. Cammie, thank you. It was cool you kind of stuck around today and were able to jump on here because we had some great stories and you were a lot closer to them than I was. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks for letting me barge in. I know I wasn't supposed to be on here today. I wanted to say hi to you and see how your trip to Ottawa went. I wanted to say hi to Kelsey because I never actually met her in person. And it's been thanks for
no problem.
Letting me.
It's the open door policy. It's the same thing from the Hot Stove Lounge. It's here in the in the Oodle Noodle studio. The door's open. Come on in. Why wouldn't you? Right?
The Oodle Noodle studio.
Yeah,
Oodle Noodle with locations in Calgary and Airdrie.
In Airdrie, yes, 2 locations. Pick up and delivery. Thanks, Cammie.
Thanks, pal.
All right. Cammie Kepke joining us. Before I get to the final mile, a couple things I want to get to. Today's reading assignment, I should have made mention of this. Number 28, What Remains from Kelsey Snow, KelseySnowWrites.com. The link is there on Twitter. I encourage you to go back. What we talked about her, just her honesty and her bravery and the way that she deals with what they're going through. Great article for you to read and take a look at. So that was today's reading assignment. Number 28, What Remains? So I'm assuming they're numbered. That's what I'm going with. KelseySnowWrites.com. Coming up on Wednesday, Bane Pettinger is a player agent. Used to actually work here in Calgary, and I got to know him with Hockey Calgary, or with Hockey Canada. He's also part of the Alphabet Sports Collective. We're going to talk to him later in the week. Vicky Hall and Eric Tahachuk. San Jose, the Sharks held their Pride Night on Saturday, and this got a lot of attention. The team went ahead. James Reimer decided he wasn't going to participate. They gave him the ability to speak to the media. He spoke to the media. He chose not to participate because of religious reasons. He has put himself out there. Fair enough. But they went ahead with it anyway, so he did not partake in the warm-up. The quote that I wanted to read was Brian Burke. I always find it funny that, if you take a side on the pride issue that you're woke or you're a lib or whatever, all of these derogatory terms that we've invented for somebody who doesn't agree with us. But Brian Burke, he's the man behind truculence, of course. He's also the man whose family started You Can Play because of his son, who was gay and passed away in a car accident. Brian Burke, I repeat that I'm extremely disappointed. I wish players would understand that the pride sweaters are about inclusion and welcoming everybody. A player wearing pride colors or tape isn't endorsing a set of values or enlisting in a cause. He's saying you're welcome here, and you are in every single building in the NHL. So I just wanted to read that from Brian Burke because he's right. All right, let's go to our final mile. Congratulations to MRU for winning their first ever U Sport. I'm so close to saying CIS. U Sport Women's Hockey Championship. It was a great story. They deserve all the credit that they get. Scott and his crew have done an amazing job down there. Again, credit to the St. Trojans men's basketball team for their national championship, which they won in their own building, and nothing will ever take that away. I mentioned I do want to thank Danny Austin and Cammie Kepke for covering us on this past Friday. They did an amazing job. The show was spectacular, and I wasn't on it, so there you go. And the Hitmen and the Tigers, I was worried that this was going to fall by the wayside. But yesterday, if you watched any or saw any of the highlights, the Calgary Hitmen and the Medicine Hat Tigers both wore mismatched socks. So they were rocking their hockey socks. Tomorrow is World Down Syndrome Day, and you're encouraged to wear mismatched socks. And for the last couple of years, Western Hockey League teams and American Hockey League teams, the Flames did it at practice. The Ottawa Senators had done it. Many, many, many in the hockey world have rocked their hockey socks, wearing mismatched socks to recognize the contributions that people with Downs bring to us. I was just in a tournament in Ottawa with that community is spectacular. But I do want to tip my hat to the Hitmen and the Medicine Hat Tigers, the Red Deer Rebels as well. And I know there's other teams, but the fact that they're continuing to do this means a lot, and it means a lot to the kids that get to see that. Representation, we keep saying this, representation matters. And their cause matters. And when they see teams taking the opportunity to do that, it makes a huge difference in their lives. She'll be a guest with us on Friday, and we did touch on it, but it's really important that I tip my hat to Vicky Hall, who becomes the first woman in the CFL Hall of Fame as a writer, as a media person. I've known Vicky for over 20 years now. She's been a guest on my programs. Her young son, AJ, is part of our Superheroes program, so I see her every Sunday as a hockey mom now. She's one of those that taught me so much about this business, how you carry yourself, how you form a question, how you cover stories. Just a spectacular writer in a day and age that, I was thinking about this today. I'm kind of like my dad. My dad growing up could afford a new car every once in a while. So we had new cars, but he really, really wanted a split window Corvette, a 60 split window Corvette. Why would you want, an old vehicle if you can have the newest, latest technology? And I do feel a little bit about that with newspapers. Like I kind of miss a big, thick Sunday section that I can spend the whole day nursing. And I really miss some of the long form writing that Vicky Hall did, especially around the CFL, but also at the NHL too. But it's really cool when your friends get recognized, and it's really cool when the community of her peers recognizes her, and the CFL did that. And I thought the outlay of support for Vicky was well earned, but also amazing as well. So really excited to have Vicky join us. We will have another busy program. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Afterburner tonight. As soon as the Flames game is over, they're going to fire it up live. I believe it's Boomer and Pinder tonight. Princey, does that sound right? Okay. I'm going to jump in, I think, tomorrow and Thursday and help out. And again, you can check out the Barn Burner weekdays from 10:30 till when they end Boomer Retro and Pinder. Thanks to our guests, Ryan Pike, contributing editor, or managing editor, I should say, of FlamesNation.ca. Sorry, Ryan, I didn't give you a demotion. You deserve a promotion. But it's long been, when I knew I was coming back, the one guest I had penciled in was Kelsey Snow, because of the appreciation for what she's done for my friend and the work and just what that family's gone through. Wanted to share her story. So I really appreciate her sitting in here. And Cammie Kepke, what an angel, just happened to come in and hang out and bump in. So it was great. Thanks to everybody. We do have a new theme. Did I mention that? Courtesy of obpmusical.com commissions. I got him to do a theme. It's about an old man doing sports talk radio who yells at people. I think it's rather appropriate. We'll be back on Wednesday. Have a great day unless you made other plans. You guys are the best.
When there's two sides to every coin, then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks, and some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fist at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown.